Carmel, and then last week we looked at being encouraged even when there's times of discouragement in your lives. I can't always preach encouraging messages. You know, it's funny. I was challenged a few years ago, not long after I had started teaching the adult Sunday school. After I started taking a rotation, teaching the adult Sunday school class, I was challenged after a series of messages that were all doom and gloom, which led to another entire series on everything not being doom and gloom. And so, but we do have a couple of, I was originally going to make this a 1 week thing, but when I looked at everything that we're going to cover, we're not going to make it in 1 week. I could rush everything. I don't want to do that. So I'm actually going to add a week to our Sunday school series. So this week, we're going to be looking at how Elijah was used to tell King Ahab some really bad news. Now, everybody gets bad news in their life, some more than others, and it's how we respond. Sometimes it's how we respond to bad news in our lives. We're going to see a response to bad news, and ultimately, this bad news is going to result in the eventual death of King Ahab. And so we're going to look at that this morning. I'm going to start in 1 Kings 21. We're going to try and cover all of chapter 21 and the majority of chapter 22. We won't read everything in chapter 22, but I want to start in 1 Kings 21. Verses. I'm going to start reading verse 1 and go through verse 4. No, it wasn't. Okay, 1 Kings 21. We'll try again. The Bible says, "And it came to pass after these things that Naboth the Jezreelite had a vineyard, which was in Jezreel, hard by the palace of Ahab, king of Samaria." There are handouts on the back table. "And Ahab spake unto Naboth, saying, Give me thy vineyard, that I may have it for a garden of herbs, because it is near unto my house, and I will give thee for it a better vineyard than it, or, if it seem good to thee, I will give thee the worth of it in money. And Naboth said to Ahab, The Lord forbid it me, that I should give the inheritance of my fathers unto thee. And Ahab came into his house heavy and displeased, because of the word which Naboth the Jezreelite had spoken to him. For he had said, I will not give thee the inheritance of my fathers. And he laid him down upon his bed, and turned away his face, and would eat no bread." So we're picking things up in chapter 21. Now, chapter 20, which we did not read, is a passage where Ahab and Ben-Hadad end up... Ahab is told in chapter 20 to ultimately slay and rid himself of Ben-Hadad, for Ben-Hadad would later become his adversary, but Ahab would not, and therefore in verse number 42, a prophet, not Elijah, but another prophet, says unto Ahab, he said unto him, Thus saith the Lord, because thou hast let go out of thy hand a man whom I appointed to utter destruction, therefore thy life shall go for his life, and thy people for his people. And the king of Israel went to his house heavy and displeased, and came to Samaria. So Ahab's already got a pronouncement on his life at this point. Ahab has already been told in verse 42 that his life was going to go, and his people and thy people, referring to the kingdom of Israel, will go for their people. So now we're in chapter 21. We're going to read how Ahab wanted a vineyard, but he didn't just want any old vineyard. This guy's the king of Israel. He probably could have had any vineyard he wanted, as long as it didn't belong to somebody else. But he wants his neighbor's vineyard. He wants Naboth's vineyard. Why? Verse 2. Well, verse 1 first, actually. Naboth the Jezreelite had a vineyard, which was in Jezreel, hard by the palace of Ahab, king of Samaria. Hard referring to adjacent, next to, just kind of like where the passage says in Acts how the synagogue was hard joined to the house where Paul stayed at. That would be the reference there. So Naboth has a vineyard, and it's right next to the palace. One of the bigger reasons why Ahab wanted this vineyard. And so Ahab is going to petition for this vineyard. He says unto Naboth, "Give me thy vineyard, that I may have it for a garden of herbs, because it is near unto my house." Now, at first, he doesn't want it free. I'm going to use the keywords there, at first, because we're going to see that it's going to become free to him later. But he's not looking for it free. He says this. He says, "And I will give thee for it a better vineyard than it, or if it seem good to thee, I will give thee the worth of it in money." You could think to yourself, before we read any further on, I'm getting a fair trade. I'm either going to get a better vineyard than what I've already got, or I'm going to have some sustenance coming to me. But we're going to find out. Naboth can't sell Ahab the vineyard. Verse 3. Naboth said to Ahab, "The Lord forbid it me that I should give the inheritance of my fathers unto thee." Now keep your, if you have a bookmark, this will be a good time to bring it out. Bookmark 1 Kings 21 and go back with me to the book of Leviticus. Leviticus 25. Now, Leviticus 25, the later, beginning in verse number 8 and running on through, we're only going to read a couple of verses from Leviticus 25, but beginning in verse 8 and running pretty much through the end of pretty much running through verse 34, describes the year of the Jubilee. Now, the year of the Jubilee was an occasion that happened every 50 years. So after every 7 Sabbaths, there was a 50th year in which the land would return to its original owner. And it was a special year. Let's read. I'm going to read just one of the other things I want to note about the year of the Jubilee. Verse 10, "And ye shall hallow the 50th year, and proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. It shall be a jubilee unto you, and you shall return every man unto his possession, and you shall return every man unto his family." There was laws in the Old Testament, under the law, that described how a person could go into slavery, but that slavery would only last until the Jubilee year. And it was a proclamation of liberty. I want to note one other thing about the Jubilee year. Verse 18. "Wherefore ye shall do my statutes and keep my judgments to do them. Ye shall dwell in the land in safety. The land shall yield her fruit, and ye shall eat your fill and dwell therein in safety. And if ye shall say, What shall we eat the 7th year? Behold, we shall not sow, nor gather in our increase." What does God promise? Verse 21. "Then I will command my blessing upon you in the 6th year, and it shall bring forth fruit for 3 years." Because you would have that 7th Sabbath, so you had the first year of rest, and then the 50th year, the year of Jubilee. And so they would not, imagine that. 1 year of work and labor for 2 more years of not having to do anything, giving the land her rest as God had said. I'll take that trade. I don't know about you, I'll take that trade. Then he says in verse number 23, this is where I wanted to get to. "The land shall not be sold forever, for the land is mine, for ye are strangers and sojourners with me. And in all the land of your possession ye shall grant a redemption for the land. If thy brother be waxen poor and has sold away some of his possession, and if any of his kin come to redeem it, then he shall redeem which his brother sold. The man have none to redeem it, and himself be able to redeem it. Then let him count the years of the sale thereof, and restore unto the overplus unto the man to whom he sold it, that he may return unto his possession. But if he not be able to restore it to him, then that which is sold shall remain in the hand of him that hath bought it until the year of Jubilee. In the year of Jubilee it shall go out and shall return unto his possession." Also, there's a corresponding passage we need to look at, and that's going to be in Numbers 36. If you're not quick enough, that's okay. You can jot down Numbers 36, verses 7 through 9. I'll read it for you. The Bible says, "So shall not the inheritance of the children of Israel remove from tribe to tribe. For every one of the children of Israel shall keep himself to the inheritance of the tribe of his fathers. And every daughter that possesseth an inheritance in any tribe of the children of Israel shall be wife unto one of the family of the tribe of her father, that the children of Israel may enjoy every man the inheritance of his fathers. Neither shall the inheritance remove from one tribe to another tribe, but every one of the tribes of the children of Israel shall keep himself to his own inheritance. Under the Levitical law, Naboth's not allowed to sell his land. Go back to 1 Kings. So first, Ahab has done wrong in not taking Ben-Hadad, and by sparing Ben-Hadad's life, and has been given had a pronouncement on his life. Now he wants a vineyard. He can't have the vineyard either. He's not gotten his way twice now, in just these last handful of verses we've read. How does Ahab respond? Verse 4. And Ahab came into his house heavy and displeased because of the word which Naboth the Jezreelite had spoken him. For he had said, I will not give the inheritance of my fathers. And he laid him down upon his bed and turned away his face and would eat no bread. Went on a hunger strike. Essentially like, I can't have this vineyard, I'm not going to eat. So Ahab is displeased, he's distressed, he's down, he's already learned his fate, and he can't even buy the beautiful next door vineyard. So he sulks to his wife, wicked Queen Jezebel, who connives this plan. Go verse 5. Jezebel's wife came to him and said unto him, Why is thy spirit so sad that thou eatest no bread? And he said unto her, Because I spake unto Naboth the Jezreelite, and said unto him, Give me thy vineyard for money, or else if it please thee, I will give thee another vineyard for it. And he answered, I will not give you thy vineyard. Jezebel his wife said unto him, Dost thou now govern the kingdom of Israel? Arise and eat bread, and let thine heart be merry. I will give thee the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite. So she wrote letters in Ahab's name, sealed them with a seal, and sent the letters unto the elders and to the nobles that were in his city dwelling with Naboth. She wrote in the letter, saying, Proclaim a fast, and set Naboth on high among the people, and set 2 men, sons of Belial, before him, to bear witness against him, saying, Thou didst blaspheme God and the king, and then carry him out and stone him that he may die. And the men of his city, even the elders and the nobles were the inhabitants in the city, did as Jezebel had sent unto them, and as it was written in the letters which she sent unto them. They proclaimed the fast, set Naboth on high among the people. There came in 2 men, children of Belial, and sat before him. The men of Belial witnessed against him, even against Naboth, in the presence of the people, saying, Naboth did blaspheme God and the king. Then they carried him forth out of the city, and stoned him with stones, that he died. Then they sent to Jezebel, saying, Naboth is stoned and is dead. It came to pass, when Jezebel heard that Naboth was stoned and was dead, that Jezebel said to Ahab, Arise, take possession of the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite, for he refused to give thee for money, for Naboth is not alive, but dead. It came to pass, when Ahab heard that Naboth was dead, that Ahab rose up to go down to the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite to take possession of it. We'll stop right there. So Jezebel comes up with a plan to perk up her husband, the king. And this plan is that she's going to write letters in his name and use his seal. So the inhabitants of Jezreel are going to think this actually came from the king when it actually came from the queen. And so she connives this evil scoundrel plan to give Ahab her husband this request. And it's amazing what some people will go to get what they want, isn't it? Anyway, verse what did I leave on? So not only that, but she gets 2 liars, referred to here as men. Sometimes also in the Bible it can be referred to as children of Belial. They're no good. Those are people that are no good, and sometimes you can be referred to as scoundrels and other things. But these are people that obviously, and so she gets these people to go and falsely accuse Naboth, who has this beautiful next door vineyard that Ahab wanted but couldn't have because of the Levitical laws. And so Naboth is going to be falsely accused, falsely tried, and then he's going to be stoned to death. Now, Now Naboth would have passed his land off to his sons, and he had sons. We're not told in this passage he has sons, but we are told in the Bible that he had sons. 2 Kings 9. 2 Kings 9. Just verse 26. Surely I have seen yesterday the blood of Naboth and the blood of his sons, saith the Lord, and I will requite thee in this plot, saith the Lord. Now therefore take and cast him into the plotted ground according to the word of the Lord. So this is referring to, Naboth had sons, and they were also put to death. So now therefore Naboth's dead, his sons are dead, so now Ahab's going to go and take possession of the vineyard. So what a conniving plan. Behold, nothing is a secret by the Lord, and so he's going to he's going to go and get Elijah, and Elijah is going to go confront the king. Verse 17. We're back in 1 Kings 21, sorry, if you haven't turned back there. Back to 1 Kings 21. The word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite, saying, Arise, go down to meet Ahab king of Israel, which is in Samaria. Behold, he is in the vineyard of Naboth, whither he's gone down to possess it. And thou shalt speak unto him, saying, Thus saith the Lord, Hast thou killed and also taken possession? Thou shalt speak unto him, saying, Thus saith the Lord, In the place where dogs lick the blood of Naboth, shall dogs lick thy blood, even thine. And Ahab said to Elijah, Hast thou found me, O mine enemy? And he answered, I have found thee, because thou hast sold thyself to work evil in the sight of the Lord. Behold, I will bring evil upon thee, and will verse 22, and will make thine house like the house of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, and like the house of Baasha the son of Ahijah, for the provocation wherewith thou hast provoked me to anger, and made Israel to sin. And of Jezebel also spake the Lord, saying, The dog shall eat Jezebel by the walls of Jezreel. Him that dieth of Ahab in the city, the dog shall eat, and him that dieth in the field shall the fowls of the air eat. But there was none like unto Ahab, which did sell himself to work wickedness in the sight of the Lord, whom Jezebel his wife stirred up. And he did very abominably in following idols, according to all things as did the Amorites, whom the Lord cast out before the children of Israel. We'll stop there for just a few minutes. Elijah now proclaims a further pronouncement on King Ahab. He prophesies that dogs will lick his blood. Ahab declares Elijah his enemy, verse 20. And had earlier, a couple of weeks ago we looked at this passage, he had earlier called Elijah one that troubleth Israel. That's 1 Kings 18, verse 17. You know, if Ahab would have just been even somewhat remotely receptive to the Lord and to Elijah, Elijah would have been a wonderful counterpart for him. Elijah wouldn't have had to treat him so hostilely. But the reality is that is the wickedness of King Ahab and the wickedness of his wife Queen Jezebel was such that Elijah seemed unto him as one that troubleth Israel or his enemy, but in reality is Ahab had long made enemies with God's servants, and ultimately before God, and had made God out to be someone he wasn't, and he had gone on and worshipped idols. He'd been long away on that. Elijah would have been a great counterpart to him. Now God promises to make his home like that of Jeroboam and of Baasha. Now those are references, you can find those in 1 Kings 15 and 1 Kings 16. So if you want to just jot those down and read, and you can find those on your own time. And he also prophesies Jezebel's death. That you'll find in 2 Kings chapter 9. Now, note what was said about Ahab's life again. Verse 25. There was none like unto Ahab, which did sell himself to work wickedness in the sight of the Lord, whom Jezebel his wife stirred up. And he did very abominably in following idols, according to all things, as did the Amorites, whom the Lord cast out before the children of Israel. Boy, I wouldn't want that kind of attachment said about me. But that was said about Ahab. There was none like unto him. That's not the first time that phrase has been said about Ahab. We read that a few weeks ago at the tail end of 1 Kings 16. He was evil above all that were before him. Now, verse 27 and through the end of the chapter, we're going to see just a little bit of a turn of Ahab. Just a little bit. And it's going to delay judgment. And why is the judgment delayed? Because God is merciful. Because God didn't give Ahab at that exact moment what Ahab probably deserved. Much the same in our lives. Verse 27, and it came to pass when Ahab heard those words, that he rent his clothes and put sackcloth upon his flesh, and fasted and lay in sackcloth, and went softly. The word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite, saying, Seest thou how Ahab humbleth himself before me? Because he humbleth himself before me, I will not bring the evil in his days, but in his son's days will I bring the evil upon his house. Ahab moves the hand of God enough to where judgment doesn't come upon his house that day, but it will come to pass in his son's days. Ahab humbles himself, God sees us, and declares that he brings the evil in his son's days. That's going to be referring to 2 Kings chapter 10. And that's where Jehu is going to ultimately slay Ahab, destroy Baal out of Israel. Now, we know from a basic study of the kings of Israel, there was not one godly king in all of the northern kingdom, the kingdom of Israel's history. But there were a handful of kings that did not wholly give themselves over to worship of Baal and to full-on idolatry like Ahab, and also like his son Ahaziah. We'll look at Ahaziah a little more in depth next week. Now, chapter 22. Now, you can look at chapter 22, and you'll see here, there's 50 verses in chapter 22. But we're not going to be looking at all of the verses. However, I do want to make a couple of quick notes about chapter 22, and then we'll look at Ahab's last moments. Chapter 22. They continued 3 years without war between Syria and Israel. And it came to pass in the 3rd year, we're going to be introduced to another character here, but we're going to be introduced to the king of Judah, the southern kingdom at this time. The kingdom of Judah is run by a man named Jehoshaphat. Now, Jehoshaphat, unlike the kingdom of Israel, which did not have good king, not a single king in Israel did right in the sight of the Lord, Judah had some kings who did right in the sight of the Lord. Jehoshaphat is one such king. However, Jehoshaphat has a problem. As one problem that kind of plagues him throughout his entirety of leading the southern kingdom. What is Jehoshaphat's problem? Sorry? He kept company with his enemies. Yeah, you can put it that way. I referred to it as he had a godly king who struggled mightily with unholy alliances. And so whether it be Ahab, whether it be Ahaziah, and even one other, he unfortunately on several occasions he kept company with his enemies. He even made leagues with them. We're not to make good friends of the enemies of God. Now, we are in the world, but we're not of the world. So we want to, it's said you keep your friends closer, your enemies closer. Well, you don't want to actually, but you want to love your enemies enough and live right by them enough that they'll see their need of a savior. But we're not going to go out and make leagues with them, make it to where kind of like Jehoshaphat here. So Jehoshaphat is a good example of what not to do in several instances in his life. So that's just a little bit about Jehoshaphat, but our study's not about Jehoshaphat. Our study is about Ahab and about Elijah. Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, came down to the king of Israel. The king of Israel said unto the servants, Know ye that Ramoth and Gilead is ours, and we be still, and take it not out of the hand of the king of Syria? He says unto Jehoshaphat, Wilt thou go with me to battle to Ramoth Gilead? Jehoshaphat said to the king of Israel, I am as thou art, my people is thy people, my horses is thy horses. So he's got a league. He's essentially got a league. He's got a very much working relationship with the king of Israel, with evil. Jehoshaphat said unto the king of Israel, Inquire, I pray thee, at the word of the Lord today. Then the king of Israel gathered the prophets together, about 400 men, and said unto them, Shall I go against Ramoth Gilead to battle, or shall I forbear? They said, Go up, for the Lord shall deliver it into the hand of the king. Now I could imagine Ahab having his prophets together. Are his prophets true prophets or false prophets? They're false prophets. Would a false prophet tell the king really what he needed to hear? No, absolutely not. These prophets are going to tell Ahab what Ahab wants to hear, not what Ahab needs to hear. But Jehoshaphat thankfully has enough sense, even in this unholy alliance. He has enough sense to inquire of the Lord. He's verse 7. Jehoshaphat says, Is there not here a prophet of the Lord besides, that we might inquire of him? Now we're going to be introduced to Micaiah real quickly. The king of Israel said unto Jehoshaphat, There is yet one man, Micaiah the son of Imlah, by whom may we inquire of the Lord. But I hate him, for he doth not prophesy good concerning me, but evil. So of course the wicked king Ahab is going to have 400 other guys who will speak for him and for his wants and for his selfish desires over one man that's going to stand for right and who's going to give him what he actually needed. Let's see here. All right, verse 9. Then the king of Israel called an officer and said, Hasten hither Micaiah the son of Imlah. The king of Israel and Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, each sat on his throne, having put on their robes, in a void place in the entrance of the gate of Samaria, and all the prophets prophesied before them. Zedekiah the son of Shenah made him horns of iron, and he said, Thus saith the Lord, With these shalt push the Syrians till thou hast consumed them. All the prophets prophesied so, saying, Go up to Ramoth Gilead and prosper, for the Lord shall deliver it into the king's hand. But of course, remember, those are the lying prophets. Now, verse 12. The messenger that was gone to call Micaiah spake unto him, saying, Behold, now the words of the prophets declare good unto thy king with one mouth. Let thy word, I pray thee, be like the word of one of them, and speak that which is good. Micaiah is not going to fall for this. Micaiah is not going to speak what is right unto Ahab. Micaiah is going to speak what is right unto God. And whatever the consequences be, those are the consequences before earth. Because he'd rather have the consequences on earth than the consequences before God in heaven. Ahab's prophets tell them to go into battle, for they're going to prevail. Jehoshaphat desires to hear from a true prophet, and Micaiah, whom Ahab hates, is summoned. Now, here's what Micaiah says. Verse 14. Micaiah said, As the Lord liveth, what the Lord saith unto me, that will I speak. Came to the king. The king said unto him, Micaiah, shall we go against Ramoth Gilead to battle, or shall we forbear? And he answered him, Go and prosper, for the Lord shall deliver it unto the hand of the king. The king said unto him, How many times shall I adjure thee that thou tell me nothing but that which is true in the name of the Lord? He said, I saw all Israel scattered upon the hills, as sheep that have not a shepherd. And the Lord said, These have no master. Let them return every man to his house in peace. He tells him basically, if he goes out to the battle, he's going to die in the battle. Does Ahab want to hear this? No. Does Ahab really actually need to hear this? Yes. Is Ahab going to listen? No, because he's stubborn. Verse 18. The king of Israel said unto Jehoshaphat, did I not tell thee that he would prophesy no good concerning me but evil? Now, why is that so? Because Ahab is an evil king. Now Micaiah is going to say further. He said, hear thou therefore the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the hosts of heaven standing by him on his right hand and on his left. The Lord said, who shall persuade Ahab that he may go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead? And one said on this manner, and another said on that manner. And then came there forth a spirit, and stood before the Lord, and said, I will persuade him. The Lord said unto him, wherewith? And he said, I will go forth, and I will be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. And he said, thou shalt persuade him, and prevail also, go forth and do so. Now therefore, behold, the Lord hath put a lying spirit in the mouth of all these thy prophets, and the Lord hath spoken evil concerning thee. Now, just before you go on and accuse something here, you're going to have to make a strong reminder. Did not Pharaoh harden his heart before the Lord first, before the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart? That's exactly the same thing we're seeing here. Ahab had hardened his heart long before the Lord had hardened the heart of Ahab. So they're going to go to battle. Verse 26. And the king of Israel said, take Micaiah, carry him back unto Ammon the governor of the city, and to Joash the king's son, and say, thus saith the king, put this fellow in prison, and feed him with bread of affliction, and with water of affliction, until I come in peace. Micaiah said, if thou return at all in peace, the Lord hath not spoken by me. Is Ahab going to see Micaiah again? He is not. Why? We're about to find out. So Ahab and Jehoshaphat are going to go up to Ramoth Gilead anyway. Now, Ahab's going to be slain here. Let's start, I guess, verse 30. The king of Israel said unto Jehoshaphat, I will disguise myself and enter into the battle, but put thou on thy robes. The king of Israel disguised himself and went into the battle. The king of Syria commanded his 32 captains that had rule over his chariots, saying, fight neither with small nor great, save only the king of Israel. It came to pass when the captains of the chariots saw Jehoshaphat, that they said, surely it is the king of Israel. So here they've mistaking Ahab for Jehoshaphat. And they turned aside to fight against him. And Jehoshaphat cried out. And it came to pass when the captains of the chariots perceived that it was not the king of Israel, that they turned back from pursuing him. Jehoshaphat had actually gotten to the point here in this unholy alliance where he almost got killed. But God miraculously saves him because he cried out. Now, we're not told we're not given enough context in this passage to see that, and we don't have enough time this morning to look at it. But if you want to find out, there's a parallel passage to this that explains Jehoshaphat's cry for deliverance. And that's going to be found in 2 Chronicles, chapter number 18. So 2 Chronicles 18, I think I've given you guys quite a bit of homework. I better stop. I'm not going to. Yeah, go ahead.
The irony of Jehoshaphat accepting the change in clothes, etc. Hey, so they'll try to kill you and not me. The insanity when we make bad choices, the audacity and the ridiculous things that we do, it's just amazing to me.
Heard a wise man say, sin will take you further than you're willing to go and cost you more than you're willing to pay. And that's exactly what almost happened to Jehoshaphat. Where did I leave off? Verse 33. It came to pass when the captains of the chariots perceived that it was not the king of Israel, but rather the king of Judah, that they turned back from pursuing him. And that a certain man drew a bow at a venture, and smote the king of Israel between the joints of the harness. Wherefore he said unto the driver of his chariot, turn thine hand, and carry me out of the host, for I am wounded. The battle increased that day, And the king was stayed up in his chariot against the Syrians and died at even. And the blood ran out of the wound into the midst of the chariot. And there went a proclamation throughout the host about the going down of the sun, saying, every man to his city, and every man to his own country. Micaiah's word, which he had gotten from the Lord, because he was a true prophet, now that's come to pass. And Israel is now without a king. So the king died and was brought to Samaria, and they buried the king in Samaria. And one washed the chariot in the pool of Samaria, and the dogs licked up his blood, and they washed his armor, according unto the word of the Lord which he spake. Now the rest of the acts of Ahab and all that he did, the ivory house which he made, and all the cities that he built, are they not written in the books of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? So Ahab slept with his fathers, and Ahaziah his son reigned in his stead. So after Ahab sends Micaiah into prison, goes off into battle, Jehoshaphat's almost mistaken for Ahab wearing pretty much the same royal clothes, but Jehoshaphat cries out unto the Lord, and the Lord delivers him out of his mercy, and his life is spared as he cries out to God for deliverance. Ahab is struck by an archer's arrow and has died, and Elijah's prophecy about the dogs, that has now come to pass. So as we conclude this morning, I just wanted to note a couple of things. Ahab could have had it a lot better if he would have, even if he wasn't the most godly king Israel ever had, because in fact we know that there is no godly king in Israel. But even if he would have remotely had some kind of humility before the Lord, that he probably could have been spared from a lot more. He could have had a close compatible. He could have had close fellowship with Elijah. He could have at least had some standing. But the wickedness will take a person further than they're willing to go. Sin costs you more than you're willing to pay. It's not worth it. We also saw this morning how that Ahab couldn't get what he wanted, but when he got what he wanted, it cost him something. In fact, it cost him more than something. It cost him everything. I'm reminded of what the psalmist said about the children of Israel. What he said, and he gave them their request, but he sent leanness into their souls. My friends, I don't want if it's not good for me to have it, I don't want it. We have to get to that point in our lives. I'm thankful for this lesson. I'm thankful for the prophet Elijah. Next week, we'll look at how Elijah will be used to prophesy about King Ahaziah, and that would be the son of Ahab. We'll look at that next week. God, I just thank you so much for this opportunity you've given us to look in your word this morning. We thank you for the prophet Elijah, for how you used him, how you delivered prophecies, various prophecies through him, some for good and obviously some for bad. And Lord, we just thank you that sometimes even in a message that, and in a study that is seemingly doom and gloom, that we can still learn from it. We learn just as much sometimes we learn more from reading something that we would not do the same. And God, I just pray you would speak to our hearts as your word is open in our Sunday morning hour. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen. You're dismissed.